Data API Builder 2.0 was recently released. Learn all about what Data API Builder is, how it works, what you can use it for, and get a sneak peek at a demo. This week on Data Exposed. Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome back to Data Exposed. Today we have an exciting episode with Jerry Nixon. Jerry, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And today we're talking about Data API Builder, what it is, what's new, and anything else Jerry thinks we should know. So, Jerry, let's get right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about what Data API Builder is and why people should care?
Yeah, absolutely. Data API Builder is one of the things I love talking about because most people don't believe it as I describe it. So, the first thing just to say is before I even tell you how this fits into a regular architecture, is this is an open source project from Microsoft, free license, and there's no special strings attached. That means you can use it on prem, you can use it in Azure, or you can use it even in AWS, and it's totally cool. Where it fits is an important kind of discussion point, and it really is that in between your application and the database. One way or another, your application needs to talk to your database, and either you include all of that logic in your app, all of that logic in maybe an extracted API for your app, or you just delete all of that code, delete the entire section of your repository, and replace it with this drop-in replacement of Data API Builder, which gives you a REST API directly into SQL or a GraphQL API directly into SQL. And with the release of 2.0 last month, we now have an MCP directly into SQL if your application is an agentic app as well. So we have done what every engineer wants to do. If you had the unlimited time and budget to be able to build a super duper API with all of the filtering and pagination and authentication and all the things built into it, that's what we've done for you because it's open source. You can go in and evaluate the code for yourself, see that it's not exotic. This isn't code generation or anything like that. It drops in like a container or a sidecar process to your website, making it so that, frankly, you don't have to build this sort of redundant CRUD operation back into your database. You can rely on us doing it correctly for you. And so it's pretty sweet. 2.0 coming out gave us a lot of new features, including the ability to cache into Redis, a new authentication method of OBO or on behalf of that allows us to pass in credentials, and integration with Key Vault and all the things that you would want from an enterprise grade, ready to go drop-in replacement production API for your app. What's nice is this is tiny. I could talk about it for a long, long time because of all of its features, but it's a tiny, tiny container that you would drop into your topology, and presto, you have it, and you just configure it with a JSON file. Now, that layout that you were just showing is really the summary of everything that we do and what makes Data API Builder special. So that one JSON file that you provide, the config file down at the bottom, that is passed into the container mounted as a file. And we dynamically then, through the runtime engine, create in-memory abstractions that map to whatever it is in your database you're exposing. So in that JSON file, you say, here's my connection string, however it is you connect, if it's managed instance or username password auth or pass through, whatever it is. And then we'll connect to your database. Then in that file, you also say, here are the tables, views, and stored procedures that you want to expose in Azure SQL or in Postgres or in MySQL or in Cosmos. And then we go find those, validate that through the metadata, and create this sort of in-memory schema that as your application starts to interact with the API, we start building the queries on the back end for you so that you can interact quickly with the database. And what's great about it, Anna, is it takes it so that your engineering team doesn't have to be a super duper engineering team that knows T-SQL and how to craft a really great uh, query. Instead, all you need is a development team that understands JSON and HTTP, interacts with an endpoint like everything else, and then allow us to take the surface area of the API that kind of is a recipe that constructs that query for you. We execute the query on the back end of to the database. And what's nice is we can connect to any of those databases as well as any of those databases simultaneously. So we could have multiple databases allowing you to connect to a SQL that's on-prem as well as a SQL that's in the cloud. So with the release of 2.0, we have closed out scores of issues that have been in our backlog that we have just been dying to do. And little features like compound paths inside of your REST endpoint to allow you to kind of compose the type of API surface that you really want to have exposed. And so a lot of it is significant features as we start to enable the MCP capabilities, but also the small little paper cuts that we were just wanting to be able to give to our developer community. And since we're open source, a lot of this came from contributions from the community as well as our own engineering team as well. And open source at Microsoft is special because unlike open source anywhere else, you don't have to worry about whether or not the maintainer is still around because it's actually a product from our perspective, which means it goes through all the security reviews regularly. So we will get constant internal security audits that a normal OSS repository just doesn't get that, not in the way that we do. And so that gives a kind of another comfort level as an enterprise is trying to decide if this is the right way to expose their database to API to either a customer externally or to an internal application just using the REST endpoint. So pretty powerful all the way around. And if I could just point out one other thing, that box in the middle is sort of the engine of data API builder. And there in the middle bottom, it's permissions and policies. And one of the special things that we can do is apply custom predicates, almost like row level security and custom level security that you would see inside of SQL, but we can do that in the API layer instead. All of this capability is still free. And the beautiful part of it is if you start to use it, you will immediately become addicted to it because there are so many aspects. I mean, imagine an application you're writing and you're like, I don't want to include a database driver. So you just delete it because you really only need the API. And I don't want to have Entity Framework and Code First and all of these things. No, you absolutely don't need to think about migrations and things like that. You can push all of that into the API, start using database projects, and really kind of flow across well, the entire prescriptive guidance we have for interacting with SQL. And so it's a really neat tool to have in your back pocket to pull out, add to about any solution, save yourself a significant budget of time and money. And we love it as well. It's worth at least pointing out this is the engine inside of the Fabric API. This is the engine inside of the Rayfin tools. I mean, we have a lot of dependencies across Microsoft. So this isn't a science project that we're going to forget about tomorrow. This is very meaningful to us. And the fact that we can share it with the community to reduce the friction for developers interacting with SQL, all the better. And so what now with 2.0, it's even better than before. It's not just shiny and new. We really have introduced a lot of capabilities that weren't there before. And AKA MS/dab is how you get to our repository, or /dab/docs is how you get to our documentation on MS Learn. So it's a cool opportunity to be able to talk about Data API Builder. So thanks, Anna. I'm excited about 2.0. The teams worked really hard on it, and frankly, it's awesome.
Awesome. Well, it's great to learn all about it. I know over the years we've talked a little bit about Data API Builder on the show, but I think it's really I don't know if grown up is the right word, but like
Yeah.
met all of the customer feedback asks or many of the customer feedback asks to make this really robust and great for production types of scenarios. So I think it's awesome to see that. Thanks for sharing all that. One question I have, and then I know you also have a demo, is on the right hand side, kind of you have this these people. You have clients and you have agents. Can you tell me a little bit how somebody obviously people are thinking about using MCP servers and makes sense, but like how do you think about clients versus an agent using DAB?
Yeah, that's a great point. If so, a client could be anything. You could have a JSON application that runs in the browser and never has a server, or you could have an actual server that is using some sort of HTTP class that's interacting with the endpoint. So the nice thing is, since it's simply REST, all you need to do is interact with it like any other API, and that is your database now. And if you are an agent, so that means to say, if you're an agent wrapped around a model and you're trying to interact with the database, there's no way for an agent to interact with the database. So now with MCP capabilities inside of DAB, I can enable REST, I can enable GraphQL, I can enable MCP, I can enable all three at the same time. And I can make it so that if I have this type of client and this type of client, but I also have this AI strategy that I'm trying to implement, all three can be supported from that same API container that I've deployed. And so it's just a simple container, by the way, Kubernetes, ACA, whatever it is you want to deploy it as. And then we accept the incoming auth of whatever it is you're using, if it's Intra or some sort of custom OAuth provider. And then the outbound auth to SQL is whatever you decide as well, and we support that too. And so, yeah, you have those three different personas, right? You have like maybe a mobile application would be using GraphQL to be able to curate the query being written. GraphQL is incredibly powerful because it allows you to write compound queries. So I could say, query this database in the cloud and this database on-prem, but return it as a single payload to my application. And I can project only these columns, and I can also do join statements and filters as well. That's really powerful for GraphQL, and you see it a lot in the mobile world because you can tailor the payload. And then in REST, it's just simple, right? It's just basically an endpoint for every table, view, or stored procedure that you want to expose. And then we run it for you and then provide back the paginated JSON. And so we have all kinds of throttles inside. So if you're worried about the size of your database, the size of your data, the number of columns you're providing back, you as the developer have the control over that to make sure that if these clients are interacting with your data through a REST endpoint, you can make sure they are not destroying your database at the same time. And so there's a lot of these special capabilities to make it enterprise ready, not just like easy to use, but also feature rich. So a lot of this is turned off by default. And then as you're like, oh, I really wish we could cache, you're like, oh, caching equals true. And now all of a sudden you have the caching capability inside the container or outside in like Redis. And so there's a lot of features that you start digging into inside of DAB that you realize these clients can be extremely rich, and you don't have to make hardly any modifications to Data API Builder to get the kind of capability and to meet the demand that developers usually have for their applications. It's pretty neat. I would say it this way, from an architect's point of view, I would say if you are building custom CRUD APIs, you better have a good reason at this point, because now that we're giving you this, there's no language requirement, there's no operating system requirement. It's not SQL only. Like you can drop this anywhere, and all of a sudden you have the ability to like securely interact with your backend database in a really robust way. It should be able to honestly delete a ton of code for most developers and make it so that developers starting out don't have that sort of headwind and friction to how do I actually query the database, where I think a lot of developers rely on ORMs like Entity Framework to write the query for them because they simply don't know how. They can now rely on DAB and not have the extra of how do I use Entity Framework? How do I use these other ORMs? You don't need to. You can actually just go directly to DAB as a simple endpoint and get back some JSON. So that's the idea. We want these agents and clients to be to do as much as they can, but be as not be very sophisticated at the same time, so they can still interact with SQL and get all the benefits from the database. Pretty
Awesome.
neat.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'd love to take a quick look if you have something to show us.
Yeah, 100%. Let me show you really quickly. So I have the Omnibus extension installed right now, and so I have an environment variable that has my connection string. That's really the only thing that's special here. And so if I say right click in init, so that's initialize the JSON file, it will pop up a question for me. Oop, I just clicked off by mistake. It'll pop up a question for me to reuse that um, connection string, and it's kind of nice because we have a cross-platform CLI you can use, and if you're wondering like, "Man, how do I use that cross-platform CLI?" This extension inside VS Code really helps because it runs all of those commands, and then you can just kind of review them and see, "Oh, I start with dab init that initializes the file. Here's how I pass in the connection string." And then there are these extra pieces of whether or not I want this to be production mode or if I want this to be developer mode, and all of the defaults that make sense to you probably are in this extension, and then you can go in and tweak it as well. Once it's built, by the way, I have this is the runtime setup that says here I can enable REST or I can enable GraphQL or I can enable MCP. And I keep saying or, but it's and. You can have all three of them at the same time, or you can turn them off and off. off and on depending on what your requirements are. And then you can set up your own custom um, authentication as well as interact with open telemetry so that you can push out all of your logs and activities to a custom kind of single pane of glass to be able to monitor your API condition. So a lot of power there that's just really cool. And one other thing in this, let me just add, if I add a table, I can add, for example, a to-do table. Is just pretty simple. I'll add two actually. And we have added the ability not only to add the tables and all of their columns, but also descriptions to all of their columns as well. Now that we have
Nice.
this MCP capability, descriptions are really valuable because we
Yeah.
pass that along as semantic data to the model. And that's it. So if I were to run this today, and I'll just go ahead and run it real quick, I would just say dev start, right? And it executes it, connects it to the database. And now it's running on port 5000 right here for me. And what's cool about that is one of the things I can interact with it through Swagger or through Nitro, which is the new name for Banana Cake Pop, which is sort of Swagger for GraphQL. And I can also interact with our health endpoint. And so our health endpoint emits as JSON a whole block of things around how everything is performing inside your API. You can query that on your own with your own tool. And then we have this nice little quick viewer just so you can see that everything is running. So this is me interacting and testing to see just how fast everything is going to respond from the to-dos table or from the categories table using GraphQL. And then here's the same thing inside of REST, right? And so it's really cool to be able to just get a snapshot and see how things are going.
Nice.
And then I can also use this sort of as a recipe for my app developers to say, now that it's here, go to town. And a lot of power in your hands and a lot of responsibility too, I suppose. But it's a neat thing. So this is the Omnibus, OMNIBUS, means all contained, and it's about 10 data API builder oriented extensions inside VS Code all combined into one. And so it makes it really easy to be able to do things, including some of the more sophisticated parts of Deb, like adding relationships and enabling more difficult like capabilities. It's really neat.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, no, this is great. It looks like it's easy to get started and it seems like it's going to provide and is providing a lot of value to developers and agents both across. Jerry, thanks so much for coming on the show. I learned a lot. I think our viewers did as well. If you're watching this episode, go ahead, give it a like, leave us a comment, and let us know what you're going to use Dab for. And we'll put some links in the description for you to learn more. We hope to see you next time on Data Exposed.